Welcome to ZKast, everyone. I'm Zeus Caraval from ZK Research, and I'm here for another ZKast. This time I'm joined by Tim Dyer, who is a VP of Product Development at CommScope. Tim, thanks for joining, and quick bio on yourself, what you do, and what CommScope does.
Thanks for having me for starters, yes. Tim Dyer here. CommScope is a global provider of communications equipment. And I work specifically in one of our segments. There's 5 separate segments for the company. I work specifically in a segment that is responsible for networking, intelligent cellular, and security products. And those products that people might be familiar with, most familiar with, in fact, would be the RUCKUS products for our WLAN and our switching infrastructure. And I'm responsible for an organization known as our multi-access public and private network organization. It's the organization that we launch our network as a service from. It's the organization where we cobble together third-party products. It's the organization where we actually provide our own managed services from in support of our managed service partners and our resale organization.
All right. Well, it was not obvious to everyone from where Tim works. We're going to be talking wireless. We're going to be talking switching and 5G and really all types of different access. In fact, CommScope sponsored a survey that I ran that looked at the challenges of, the demand for different wireless technologies and also the challenges with running them separately. So we'll talk about some of that data as well. Now, one of the great debates, I'm going to pivot a little bit to technology. And one of the great debates in our industry is this cellular versus Wi-Fi argument, right? 5G versus, Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 7. And I hear all kinds of things about it, right? And I don't know why, as an industry, we have to talk in absolutes, but I think it was Pat Gelsinger a few years ago at his last VMworld. He said 5G would universally displace Wi-Fi. Right. And it's like, oh my God, you can't say stuff like that. Right. But I hear it all the time that, one's going to displace the other. And to me, that's just not true. And in fact, in the survey that we ran together, it was 85% of companies said they either have deployed or plan to deploy Wi-Fi, public cellular and private cellular. Right. And so it's and both. They have different purposes. And from your perspective, how should companies think about this debate of cellular versus Wi-Fi and where they might use each?
Well, Pat's a really smart guy, so but he's wrong.
Yeah.
And when you think about how ubiquitous Wi-Fi is, people love Wi-Fi because it's easy to use, it's familiar to them, it's in their home, it's they're at their place of business. Their IT organization is massively familiar with it. And when designed properly, it works great for its use. So its use is the point there, the point that I'd like to make. Cellular is better for some use cases. It is the perception that many have is that it's more secure. That's an argument for another day. However, at the same time, it certainly is more mobile, right? It certainly has guaranteed latencies. It certainly has attributes that are attractive to things that require movement and a broad range of coverage. And it's not to be said that Wi-Fi can't cover broad ranges, but the number of radios we have to plug in to provide for broad coverage just is impractical. So I'd say it really comes down to the use case, and it's probably, maybe that's oversaid, but it's really that simple.
And what industries are you seeing the highest uptake of private cellular?
Well, we saw, for the first few years here, we've seen outdoor use cases. You pick a percentage, definitely more than 70, could be 80, 85%, had an outdoor aspect to it. So it goes right to the previous point. That outdoor coverage just is far superior with cellular tech. And the industries that we saw, mining, we saw platforms, we saw some manufacturing, we saw ports. So that's what we've seen historically. Broad range of coverage, little combination indoor, outdoor, and even the indoor spaces can be quite large in terms of coverage. So we see a lot of category B, and then category B radios being used, and then some Cat A. And we're seeing more and more Cat A come on as the use cases move a little more indoor. So for manufacturing is a good example of that.
Yeah. In fact, I think the way I think about it is Wi-Fi is a great general purpose technology, but I think we've all experienced the case where you mentioned the airport, where you get to the airport 2 hours early, you're sitting at the gate, you're streaming a movie, and everything's working fine. And then as you get closer to the flight, there's a lot more people at the gate, and then all of a sudden things stop working. And so if you put that in a business context, and if you have factory floor equipment or warehousing equipment, you can't have that unpredictable type of performance, right? And I'll give you an example of an industry. I was at the Major League Baseball, one of their CIO meetings earlier this year, just before the All-Star game, and the head of innovation there mentioned that they're going to be taking Wi-Fi out of the dugouts and replacing it with cellular. And all this, I said, "What? Why are you doing that?" But it's going to power their Hawkeye system, which is the automated balls and strikes. And to me, he explained it's a perfect application for cellular because it's low bit rate, but it's absolutely guaranteed delivery is a must, right? So where you don't get that with Wi-Fi. And so I think if people just think of it that way, use Wi-Fi, continue to use it for your workers, for your general purpose access. But when you've got devices that need guaranteed delivery, cellular is a better option there. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm also fortunate enough to have a vertical markets organization under me. So large public venues is one of the things that one of my teams designs and sells into on a daily basis. So we're quite familiar with the use cases for stadium for both cellular as well as Wi-Fi and the scale limitations of each.
Yeah, in fact, in the survey, we did ask the respondents if a converged multi-access network would be beneficial for their business, right? And that's one network that delivers different types of access. And 100% of public venues, since you mentioned that, said it would be 88% overall, but 97% of transportation, 91% of manufacturing. So, that seems to be, well agreed upon by your peers. Now, one of the other things we investigated was the cost of having separate management consoles. So the majority of companies ran 2 or more management consoles for the different types of networks. Some had, as many as 5. And the average, the amount of wasted time and money, on average, 17% of network operations time is wasted running separate access networks, and 19% of budgets. Like, think of that's almost 20% of your budget. We live in a world now where it's very difficult to go to the business leaders and ask for even 5% more. Well, if you're throwing almost 20% out the window from redundant, operations, that seems like it's a pretty easy place, to be able to recoup some budget, right? If you just brought those things together. So, Tim, I want to ask you, like, when you talk to your customers, what are some of the kinds of challenges they face when they do have separate management tools?
You mentioned early on that we've been at this for a while. So one of my favorite terms is ships in the night. And that's in essence what you wind up with. You wind up with 2 ships in a dark night that are passing one another with zero awareness of each other. And you wind up in a situation where you have to use a swivel chair to go from one to the other to the next to the next. And you could have an IoT infrastructure that you manage one way, an OT infrastructure you manage another way, an IT infrastructure you manage another way, and a cellular infrastructure that you manage yet another way. And it just becomes untenable at some point. And the other day, my wife was telling me that we have these 2 commodities in money and time. Maybe money's not so much a commodity anymore, but we spend all our time trying to be spendthrifty with our money. We need to be more spendthrifty with our time, right? Because time is far more valuable. You can always make more money. We can't make any more time. And I view these network management councils in a very similar fashion, in which you don't have more time. You've got a volume of intake that's coming in on a daily basis, and you have to react to it. And you have to do it in a meaningful time frame. And if you can't do it at a meaningful time frame, you're either going to lose your job or you're going to lose your customer. So, so I'd say that those challenges combined create a great environment for us to have a unified offer and a unified management platform that does have visibility into the KPIs for both cellular as well as for, and I'll just lump Wi-Fi data all together for simplicity for purposes.
Yeah, you know, in the work I've done with some of the stadiums, that is one thing they've complained about is some of their systems, like the you know, that the point of sale systems that work off cellular are different than the systems that work off Wi-Fi. And so if they're trying to get data around customer behavior, they've got to take that data, then dump it into an S3 bucket, and then do their own normalize the data. And it's just a lot of, in fact, we didn't really touch on that in the survey, but if you think about, like, we looked at just the operational side, the amount of money the business must waste just trying to understand what they're looking at with their network data. That's got to be huge. Yes, so I know one of the reasons why you were interested in the data too was that as a ComScope's working on on solutions that can help bring those things together and on a converged multi-access network. So can you talk about the ComScope solution of what you guys are doing there and how it'll help your customers?
Certainly. We earlier this year, I think it was just before July, we actually went public with our new RUCKUS One platform, so cloud-based management platform. And we're in this enviable position where we've been at this a number of years. So we have multiple types of technology that satisfy a variety of use cases. Beautiful position to be in, unless you have to manage it. And I say that because you need to have some common management framework. So we went back to the drawing board to derive a common management framework that would be cloud-based, allow for not just the integration of our technology, but have a nice common look and feel to address all of it. And then also the ability to bring in third party and also bring in new tools from AI toolkits that could also be easily plugged into this new framework. And we wanted to do that for all infrastructure elements. You mentioned IoT, so IoT certainly, CBRS certainly, and private cellular, Wi-Fi, switching infrastructure, even some wireline infrastructure. So we want to have that ability to address the totality of it. And we went to market announcing that in conjunction with our multi-access public-private offer. So ultimately, we see public elements being integrated into that overall framework and solution. And then we also launched our network as a service simultaneously. And as you might imagine, network as a service, depending on what market need you're addressing, you might need to go down market, have a thinner layer or presentation layer to whoever the persona is who's looking at that, a local technician or a local asset manager or a local business owner versus a managed service provider partner. So we introduced all that to the market back earlier this year, and we're quite excited about it because, again, it addresses a lot of the things and the limitations that we've been talking about, and we think we'll be able to save people money, deliver service much more quickly, and then also introduce AI ML technology that's been around for a while, but it's really now seeing its way into the mainstream.
Yeah, see, to me, that is the key, the AI ML. Every network vendor's trying to deliver some kind of AI ML based operations, but the key to it is data, right? In data sciences, it's an expression that says good data leads to good insights. Well, if that's true, then siloed data will lead to fragmented insights. And so you may have the best, AI management tool for Wi-Fi, but if you're not looking at the CBRS and the cellular data, you're not really getting the insights from all the data, right? And I think, I think ComScope's pretty uniquely positioned there. In fact, when I think about all the vendors that play in Wi-Fi, some of them will partner, I guess, in the area of 5G or vice versa, but you're one of the few that actually, I think you might be the only that actually addresses both sides of that coin.
And it's one of the big reasons that I came here. I joined about a year and a half ago, and that was probably the biggest reason. And you're right. We don't just talk about these things, and it's not a marketing concept. We design and build radios, right? We design and build for very stringent RF environments. We design and build in challenging, otherwise challenging environments. And as a result of our design capability and our build capability, we have this great bench strength that we can draw from as it relates to deploying networks in very challenging environments. And as I said, it doesn't matter to us if it's Wi-Fi or if it's cellular. We want to choose the right technology for the right use case and the right environment to satisfy whatever the underlying business value that the customer is trying to derive.
Yeah. Now, the other term that you used, you said Naas, right? Network as a service. That outside of AI, maybe one of the most overused terms in the industry, right? And with some vendors, it just means subscription, things like that. But from your perspective, what is network as a service, and then how does your network as a service help simplify customers, the operational side of customers?
Yes. So network as a service, consider our chair, right? So when I say our chair, our ComScope chair, we are a WLAN, small cell, indoor cellular, a little bit outdoor use case provider and technology provider. So from the perspective of what is Naas to us, Naas might be something else to someone who's providing SD-WAN and SASE and wide area spigots. For us, it's more oriented around the local area network, whether that's cell-based and I know now I'm going to invent terms, but cell-based or it's WLAN-based. And it's meant to be an easy button. And the research that my team has found out that we've derived over the last 18 months is that most of the customers that are interested in a network as a service for their turnkey offer, they're in the SMB space. So we might have 85% of our customers in the SMB space. So imagine we've got 33 million businesses in the US alone that are small businesses. I'd suggest to you very few of them are IT experts. Very few of them have IT staffs. And they just need a turnkey offer for simplicity purpose. And they'd also like to buy it the same way they're buying whatever service they have at the same time. So they're buying their monthly internet service, or if they still have voice services or cell services. So they'd like to do it on a subscription basis so they don't have to pay these folks. $10,000 could be a lot of money too. Yeah. So there's a broad swath, and I'd say that's what Naas is by and large, but it doesn't preclude, the other 10% from being large organizations that also don't have an expertise in either IT or OT, and they'd like to just outsource their business, and their spends could actually be quite large. And then I'd also suggest to you that it's different. The perception's different, and the technology challenges are different for cellular versus Wi-Fi. And in the cellular arena, there just aren't enough people. There's not enough expertise. Right. The IT organizations don't have the expertise, nor do the end customers. So we see just in cellular, we're getting packaged together quite a bit with the ISV community, right? As a great example, they make an application, and we've got the underlying tech, plug us together, and provide a subscription-based service to satisfy the need. So hopefully there's an answer in there.
Yeah, no, that's good. In fact, I think when you think about the cloud economics and that as a service model, it's impacted almost every part of IT except the network. And for whatever reason, well, the reason is it's a pretty close set of companies, I suppose. But it really hasn't disrupted networking yet, but it needs to. And I do think even with some large companies, there's more of a focus on focusing on really becoming great at your core competencies and leaving the operations to somebody else. And so it's
it's interesting you say that. We were, so as we challenge our own assumptions as we're trying to take things out to market, we actually interviewed our CIO. So here's a guy who runs a network with 30,000 employees. And it took him all of about 5 seconds to say, boom, I get it. I'd even be interested in seeing a turnkey solution like that, just to see how I could offload network requirements and just managing a network to somebody else and see what the cost is. And you get to a cost benefit and you sell things on a subscription basis. It gets pretty attractive to these owners.
Yeah, in fact, one of the pieces of advice that I give IT pros is always, if you're doing things today that aren't really resume building anymore, don't do them, right? Find a way to automate the job, right? And the way you do that is to move to more of these Naas type of offerings where there is more automation and things like that built into it. So,
yes. Yeah.
So I think you're addressing where IT is going. Now, on that note, I just have one more question. And so this is, kind of outside the survey and outside ComScope, but when you think about the future of networking, you had talked about artificial intelligence. What kind of impact do you think it's going to have on networking? Where do you see it being applied, or even how are you guys thinking of using it?
Well, it's so easy to sit back and just identify one use case. And what we're finding is it's really pervasive. I mean, you were talking about data. I remember years ago I was working with a large MSO and they asked us what data sources they should dump into the pool so we could perform analytics. And my answer was pretty easy. It's all of them.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever you can dump in there, right? Just dump in there. And as a result of that thinking, we're looking at AI across the spectrum of our internal processes, as well as our external processes, as well as embedded in our technology. And that can be everything from, 65% of our calls could be, or our trouble tickets could be satisfied by just reading the manual to somebody who's calling on the other end. 65%. Dump all of your product slicks, all of your technical documents into a ChatGPT repository that can be queried. Dump all of your frequently asked questions in there, and all of a sudden, you're satisfying customer requests much more quickly, much more efficiently, and much more inexpensively. And that's one small area for us. And then of course we do have that sophistication of network now, and the networks have become a lot more sophisticated from the early days of wired LANs, and we do have visibility now with these tools to suss out what's happening in a network, identify everything down to very minute problems, right? Paper cut problems, but a paper cut problem could exist in New York, in Poughkeepsie, it could exist in Kansas City, it could exist down in Florida. And that ability to correlate all of that disparate data and give an insight that tells you to go change a prom, or that you've got some underlying issue that you could more easily address that isn't seen as a pervasive problem. I think that has huge impact also, both financially, and financial could be a combination of time as well as money.
Yeah, it's funny because when I talk to some IT pros about AI, I think this vision of the network running itself always comes to their mind. And I do think we'll get there someday. But I use the analogy, it's a little bit like autonomous vehicles. Nobody today is jumping into a car with no driver, no steering wheel, except maybe in San Francisco, but they've had problems with that. But there's lots of AI capabilities built in cars today, right? Parallel park assist, lane change alert, things like that autopilot, right? That makes us safer. And I think what IT pros should look at is these really hard to solve problems. Like, to me, Wi-Fi troubleshooting is one of the hardest things there is to do because nobody knows what the problem is, right? And so let the machines fix it, right? And free up your time to do something else. And so, I was glad to get your thoughts on that, though. And I also do think when you talked about data, we've been talking about cloud networking for a long time, at least cloud management. And there's always been, why cloud, why now? I think AI is that tipping point, though, because you do need all your data aggregated together. And I think the cloud just lends itself better to that than trying to aggregate all your data from your different on-prem systems. And so I think that'll act as a catalyst to this network as a service model. So.
Yes, I couldn't agree with that more. In fact, when you look at building networks, some of the manufacturing networks that we built for people, all they wanted was access to the internet, and they couldn't get it from their IT guys because they're so busy fighting fires someplace, and they didn't want to deal with it. And every one of these tools, every one of these devices needs to go get its marbles from the internet to begin with. So we're laying down these paths to the internet. What a great location for us to capture and correlate and address issues and problems.
All right, Tim. Well, thanks for the discussion. I will make sure I include the links to both RUCKUS One and ComScope in the YouTube description below. Anything else you want to add?
No, thanks for your time, ZKast. Really appreciate it.
Well, then on behalf of Tim Dyer, I'm ZKast, and thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on my next episode of ZKast.